vision, or have another print disability, which makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org.
Hello, this is Jackie, and for the next hour I'll be reading from the Sunday, July 26th issue of the Viewpoints section of the Buffalo News on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Next stop, fast buses, better service. The Democrats, calling themselves socialists, are nothing of the kind. By Ronald Hirsch of the Fulcrum. Gertrude Stein famously wrote, "A rose is a rose is a rose is a rose," meaning everyone knows what a rose is. The same cannot be said of a socialist. There are many Democratic politicians who proudly call themselves socialists or democratic socialists, and there are many adversaries who brand those individuals as socialists. Both sides use the same word, but the word means very different things to the two sides. First, the dictionary political science definition of socialism is any of various egalitarian economic and political theories or movements advocating collective or governmental ownership and administration of the means of production and distribution of goods. This does not define Bernie Sanders, Zoran Mamdani, or other Democrats who call themselves socialists. This is despite the fact that the Democratic Socialists of America, DSA, has a goal to collectively own the key economic drivers that dominate our lives, such as energy production and transportation. Even the DSA, saying that the end of capitalism is unlikely in the foreseeable future, instead focuses on increasing the power of the people within the democratic capitalist structure. At the root of our socialism is a profound commitment to democracy as means and end. DSA fights for reform today that will weaken the power of corporations and increase the power of working people. For example, we support reforms that decrease the influence of money in politics, empower ordinary people in workplaces and the economy, and restructure gender and cultural relationships to be more equitable. The DSA is thus, from a practical perspective, an organization fighting for a democracy as defined by the Declaration of Independence, a democracy that is all about securing the rights of all people and the equality of all people. Indeed, Thomas Jefferson, in his last letter, stated that the Declaration of Independence gave voice to the truth that mass of mankind has not been born with saddles on their backs, nor a favored few booted and spurred, ready to ride them legitimately by the grace of God. And that is what Sanders, Mamdani, and others are fighting for. They're not arguing for government or collective ownership of any means of production. And thus, they are not socialists with a capital S, even though they are members of the DSA. They are socialists only in the sense that they believe that the government must be focused more on the rights of the people. Neither they nor the DSA presents a threat to our capitalist structure. To some of its details, yes, but not the basic structure. They are Democrats seeking a government that is focused on fulfilling the promises of our founding principles: the equality of all, the right of all to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and the role of government being to secure those rights, while recognizing that to do that, creating the conditions for a prosperous economy and industry is essential for government to secure those rights for all. But Republicans sense the opportunity to create a boogeyman that scares off voters. And so Republicans brand members of the DSA as socialists with a capital S, or even communists, an accusation of being un-American, as President Trump has recently done. But there is nothing communistic about the DSA. As noted above, their commitment to democracy is central. What they are fighting for is a democracy within our capitalist system that is truer to the founding principles of our country. Likewise, the Democratic centrists who recently published their new Promise to America and resorted to the trope of calling DSA members socialists are also seeking to negatively brand them. They need to recognize the flaw in their approach, and if they truly want to accomplish what they state in their promise, they will have to shift to the left and more forcefully support the rights of the people as promised in the Declaration of Independence. Knowing that will mean that they will oppose corporate interests with some regularity. And I would respectfully suggest that Sanders, Mamdani, and others stop labeling themselves as socialists, because that label is not technically appropriate and gives Trump and his MAGA allies ammunition with which to rouse the very people who they are fighting for to vote against. Their recent success in election primaries is not a function of this label, but of the message that they are advocating. Ronald Hirsch is a teacher, legal aid lawyer, survey researcher, nonprofit executive, consultant, composer, author, and volunteer. He's a graduate of Brown University and the University of Chicago Law School and is the author of We Still Hold These Truths. You can read more about his writing at preservingamericanvalues.com. In everybody's column, Letters from Our Readers, Langworthy off base on Canadian wildfires. Congressman Nick Langworthy's recent statement regarding Canadian wildfires is appalling. Without showing an ounce of concern or compassion for how the fires are impacting our Canadian neighbors, he calls for meaningful actions and consequences for not doing so, as if the Canadian government is deliberately directing smoke to Western New York. My suggestion to Langworthy is just to once focus his attention and demands on the person in the White House who has set our democracy on fire and continues to stoke it every day. As the congressman said in his self-righteous statement, millions of Americans are paying the price for policies they had no role in creating. To our Canadian friends, my apologies for the thoughtless and embarrassing words of someone who should know better. Elizabeth Accordino, Perrysburg. Consider a switch to a 30-hour work week. The House of Representatives just passed the Sunshine Protection Act, which would shift the country to year-round daylight saving time. I understand the temptation to have more daylight in the evening, particularly during the long, dark winters we have in Buffalo. But consider the negative repercussions. Between December 5th and February 1st in Buffalo, the sun would not rise until 8:30 in the morning. Doctors argue that being exposed to sunlight in the morning is important for health and sleep quality, and while we all want to stop changing our clocks twice a year, I propose that the better solution would be year-round standard time within a 30-hour work week. When the 40-hour week was fought for by organized labor, many believed that work week would continue to shrink as worker efficiency increased, but that hasn't happened. I argue that the time has come. Research has shown that in countries where 6-hour workdays have been tested, such as the UK, workers get the same amount of work done in 6 hours as they do in 8. This means that if we reduced our work schedule from 9 to 5 to 9 to 3, businesses would experience almost no loss in productivity, while saving on overhead by closing offices 2 hours earlier. Worker well-being would be greatly increased as well. Parents would be on the same schedule as their children, work-life balance would be improved for everyone, and the sun would still be up when you finished work at 3. Kyle Stillwell, Buffalo. Hateful graffiti has no place here. Last week, seeking relief from Buffalo's heat dome, I decided to take a long walk along Bird Island Pier to catch the cool breezes off the Niagara River. It's one of my favorite summer walks, especially in the shadow of the storied Peace Bridge. I was astonished, however, to find graffiti beneath the bridge that read, "Death to Israel." Whatever one's views on the Middle East, this is a call for violence. It is hate speech, and it has no place anywhere, least of all on a bridge dedicated to peace. Reasonable people can disagree about governments and international conflicts. However, public messages advocating death and violence cross an unmistakable line. Whether directed at Israel or any other nation or people, this kind of rhetoric has no place in Buffalo. The Peace Bridge is one of Western New York's most recognizable landmarks, and an international gateway visited by residents and travelers from around the world. Allowing hateful graffiti to remain visible reflects poorly on our community and undermines the values of civility and respect that Buffalo strives to uphold. I urge the Peace Bridge Authority and other responsible agencies to remove this graffiti promptly and to continue responding swiftly to vandalism that promotes hatred or violence. We should be able to debate world events passionately without tolerating calls for death and destruction in our public spaces. Lydia Langer, Buffalo. Money for North Aud can fund homes instead. As a Buffalonian deeply concerned about the future of downtown, I'm trying to get a better understanding of the governor's proposal to build approximately 250 rental apartments in 2 buildings at the North Aud block at Canalside. The cost of this project to the taxpayers of New York is approximately $200 million, or approximately $786,000 per rental unit. This is an enormous sum of money, exceeding the total amount of state, federal, and local funds that have been spent on the entire 20-acre Canalside site over the past 20 years. Would not the people of Buffalo, not to mention taxpayers throughout the entire state, be better off if these public funds were used not to create 250 rental units, but rather 250 owner-occupied homes? Think of it. For the cost of 10 of the proposed rental units, $7,860,000, each of those 250 people could be eligible for no less than $30,000, which would be used to leverage and incentivize the purchase of 250 actual homes. Wouldn't a program like this not only be far cheaper, but also, by creating a new class of homeowners, a far more effective way of dealing not only with the housing shortage, but the equity gap that exists between those of us who own their homes and those who don't? Seems like a no-brainer. Save the taxpayers literally tens of millions of dollars, while at the same time creating a new class of homeowners in the city of Buffalo. By Mark Goldman, Buffalo. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from the Viewpoints section of the Buffalo News on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Trump doesn't know anything about integrity. Trump says he has such a grave concern about election integrity that he has declassified intelligence documents in order to expose the biggest cover-up in American history, the theft of the 2020 election. But he made no mention of his documented personal involvement in attempting to illegally overturn the same election results. He continues to repeatedly peddle falsehoods about election integrity and non-existent fraud. If the U.S. election system is so wrought with fraud, where was his concern regarding the integrity of the 2016 and 2024 elections? Neither his speech nor the posting of the declassified documents provided a shred of actual evidence or corroborated any of his unfounded allegations of election interference or fraud. The president is a persistent purveyor of falsehoods, and his speech on Thursday proved this, as it was brimming with blatant lies and misrepresentations of the truth. He is attempting to sow doubt in a historically honest and efficient election system through deceit in order to influence the upcoming midterm elections in his party's favor. He will lie, cheat, and steal to maintain control of Congress and avoid losing his precious, although corrupt, power. Trump also complains about TV networks and their fake news nearly every day, and yet he thinks he has the right to lie to the American people via the same networks whenever he wants. Networks have no obligation to be his propaganda platform or to propagate his election and fraud falsehoods. And we are entitled to fair elections without Trump's interference. David Paoletta, Cheektowaga. The city needs more synchronized lights. I do not live or pay taxes in the city of Buffalo, but I do work and recreate in Buffalo. When I go to work and return from Buffalo General Medical Center, I use the Elm Oak Arterial. I start and end on Seneca Street. Both streets have synchronized lights. If the first light is green and you maintain a speed of 30 to 32 miles per hour, you go from beginning to end without stopping. This saves time, gas, and eliminates pouring exhaust into the air while waiting at a red light. Win, win, win. I realize Main Street with the train is a separate issue. But is it not possible to make other north-south streets one-way, such as Franklin, Elmwood, Pearl, Washington, and some others, and use this synchronized light system on them to benefit gas usage, time savings, and air quality? Marianne Inglefinger, Orchard Park. We got mail. 32 letters were received this week. The number one topic was President Trump. 2, Representative Langworthy. 3, Iran. 4, the environment. And 5, local issues. There's a color picture of the White House with several cranes rising above it. And below that, there is a picture of Representative Nick Langworthy. The caption reads, "Construction equipment is visible behind the White House through a fenced-off Lafayette Square during ongoing renovations. Readers criticize President Trump's domestic plans and policies, along with his global decision-making." And alongside the Langworthy photo, The caption reads, "Readers criticize Republican Representative Nick Langworthy for scolding Canada about recent wildfires because Canada refuses to properly manage its forests." The editorial. There is a color photograph of a woman holding a sign that says, "Save our backyards." The caption reads, "Lexi Hawk, who learned that radioactive waste is present on her property in Niagara Falls, pleads for help from authorities at a news conference earlier this month." Deadly waste. The DEC and EPA must work closely with Falls residents on radioactive findings. There are still too many unanswered questions, but at least the organizations responsible for ensuring the environmental health of Western New York and all of New York State are present and engaged as the specter of radioactive contamination looms over a neighborhood in Niagara County. As the news Mackenzie Schumann has reported, following aerial and ground level surveys that detected areas of potential radiological activity, further ground level surveys conducted by the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation and the Environmental Protection Agency pinpointed 121 Town of Niagara homes that could contain elevated radiation levels. Additional ground-level testing identified 6 locations with levels concerning enough to need more intensive investigation, including digging into the soil. At least 4 sets of homeowners have requested relocation, which EPA officials are in the process of providing. No one wants to go on the record saying as much, but this is shaping up to be yet another grim chapter in the continuing saga of toxic environmental contamination that has been unfolding throughout the Niagara region for decades. At least this time, detection and remediation efforts are already underway. They are not, as with Love Canal, the reluctant and much delayed result of homeowner activism. As DEC Commissioner Amanda Lefton and EPA Region 2 Administrator Michael Martucci explained in a meeting with the editorial board, the radiological surveys were undertaken proactively as follow-ups to a similar investigative effort in 1984 that had left too many questions behind. The goal was, as Lefton put it, to find out, is there something here? And we thought to ourselves, we don't want to wait 20 years to find a problem to discover something was wrong, something that we could have prevented if we had asked the question. Thus, the current Niagara and Erie County Radiological Assessment was launched in 2023, resulting in findings that are being revealed to homeowners and the general public today. As those findings undergo on-site screening and laboratory testing, it will be essential for DEC and EPA officials to work closely with residents, answering their questions and addressing their concerns. Complete transparency is a must. Imagine a team of scientists digging in your backyard, looking for toxins in soil you've used to grow flowers and vegetables, toxins that may have been there for decades, resulting in possibly harmful exposure. The radioactive contamination could have its source in the Niagara Falls chemical industry, which had been selling various types of slag, a byproduct of superheated industrial processing, as fill for construction projects. But it's also true that radioactive waste from the Manhattan Project had been stored in the Niagara region until 1952, with that lengthy cleanup undertaken by the Army Corps of Engineers. As of Thursday's meeting with the editorial board, the DEC and EPA team had 101 signed property access agreements, and not all of them came from the original 121 identified properties. It seems as though other homeowners may be coming forward, which raises the question of wide the DEC EPA net will eventually spread. In the meantime, the teams have a system for working on the identified properties, with immediate on-site screening tests assessing risk levels and whether relocation offers are necessary. It should be noted that health physicists and medical doctors consult on those decisions. Then, extensive lab tests, which take more time, will determine remediation strategies. Lefton indicated that regular communication between the DEC and EPA team and residents in ongoing and that further community meetings will take place. That should always be given in these circumstances. It's also a given that residents will continue to express their outrage and bewilderment. DEC and EPA officials should respond with answers and help. Decades of unregulated waste disposal by both industry and government polluted these neighborhoods. It's a lesson in the importance of the protections we have now and a cautionary example of what happens when we undermine them. In another voice, healthcare, the New York Health Act should be passed and enacted by James Bono, Ray Ellen Cavey, and Alice Carley. As described in a recent news editorial, the New York State Legislature session ended without addressing a critical issue. The 450,000 state residents who are now without health insurance coverage they had been receiving under the federally funded Essential Plan, which was cut from the federal budget last year. If enacted, the New York Health Act, NYHA, would bring single-payer universal health care to every New Yorker, starting at birth. NYHA benefits are paid for by a graduated tax based on income, which would be less than 95% currently paid for health care. It is also split with employers, also less than 95% of employers currently pay. The difference is, if you're not employed, you're still covered. Under the current system of employer-based private insurance and Medicaid, New Yorkers are paying more and getting less. Private insurance and pharmaceutical companies making huge profits and hospitals closing across the state. But there is light on this critical problem. A new analysis by health economists Dr. Cheryl Cashin and Dr. Judith Esterquest calculated that the fiscal impact of the New York Health Act on counties, municipalities, and school districts. Reviewing public records for each individual county, city, and school district allowed them to determine what health care actually cost in 2025. From the same public data, they were able to calculate what local governments would have paid in 2025 under the New York Health. Astonishingly, counties would spend 90 to 95% less, while municipalities and school districts would pay 80 to 85% less. As just one example, the city of Buffalo would have saved well over $88 million. That amounts to about 14% of the total city budget for that year. Under New York Health, every New Yorker would have the same high-quality health care with more comprehensive coverage. No more copays or deductibles, and no more restrictive networks or denied claims. Unions would keep all benefits they have won. Simultaneously, healthcare spending at county, municipal, and school district levels would be drastically reduced. The NYHA is a healthcare bill, but it is also a property tax relief bill and a lifeline for local governments and school districts. James Bono, Ray Allen Cavey, and Alice Carley, New York Health Campaign, Western New York, chapter. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from the Viewpoints section of the Buffalo News on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. In the My View column, a final farewell is not always sad, by Rabbi Alex Lazarus Klein, who has been present for many final goodbyes. 2.5 decades ago, my mom, sisters, and I stood around the body of my maternal grandfather in the final moments of his life. Suffering from Parkinson's disease, which had robbed him of his vitality, he lay comfortably on a bed at the Jewish home of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. A brilliant man who had charged the beaches of Normandy during the Second World War, knew 7 languages, and ran a plumbing supply store with his brother, he, at one time, could name every player on his beloved Red Sox and Celtics going back decades. In the waning hours of the Tisha B'Av, a Jewish memorial marking the destruction of the first and second temples, my grandfather had not eaten in weeks and was ready to die. "It's okay," we told him. "We love you," we said, and then we sang traditional Jewish prayers like the Shema and Oseh Shalom, allowing his soul to make safe passage to the world beyond. When the moment of death occurs, you can always tell, not only by the ceasing of the long belabored breaths, but by the placidity of a body no longer filled with life. Over the years, I've been present for dozens of passings. My maternal grandmother, a few years after, congregants who call me in when the hospital is removing a ventilator, and quiet bedrooms in houses and hospice centers. While you may think it would be sad to be there in that moment, I don't think of them as somber. They are sacred, blessed times, usually filled with love and gratitude. It is the hardest thing we do as human beings, saying goodbye to the ones we love, and one of the holiest. As a rabbi, I am often brought in to recite the final prayers, the vidu, where we offer forgiveness to the person dying, and we, in turn, ask them to forgive us. Life, no matter how short, hard, or broken, is complete in its own way. Whether a few short hours or 100 years, we must find acceptance of this gift we have been given. The dying often communicate without words. I remember a tear rolling down the face of a teenager who was lying in the intensive care unit. A few months back, the wife of someone dying wanted to physically be in the bed of her husband as he gave his last few breaths. No one can tell us fully what the experience will be like, but our bodies inevitably know what to do. We can learn a lot from someone not only by how they have lived, but how they have died. People often want their loved ones present and not to suffer. The process of death can be unpredictable. Like a pregnancy, it can drag out or be very short. Sometimes I'll suggest for families to experiment, being in the room and giving them space. Sometimes the person will wait for a family member to come in from out of town. The rare times I've been present during an unexpected tragedy, it is especially hard. In those cases, there is little time to come to terms with what just happened. My grandfather's death was not a surprise. He had been in decline for more than a year. My mom, sisters, and I felt joy and relief when he finally passed. We had been able to be there for him, just like he had been there for us. And while it still hurts not to have him in our lives, we treasure that dark August night when we bid him farewell. The My View column is a first-person column open to all Western New Yorkers. If your article is selected for publication, a photo of you is required. Americans are free to be suckers under weaker protections, by Frama Haroop. Many of today's consumer loans are legal but abusive. Payday lenders and used car sellers often steer customers into costly contracts they barely understand. Low-income borrowers with jobs and therefore dependable cash flow to siphon off are favored targets. Sure, there's a sucker born every minute, as P.T. Barnum allegedly said. But now we have a federal government that's gone backward in providing protection from predators just as they adopt sophisticated technology to ply their craft. Criminals now use AI to generate fake images and scrub their pitches of misspellings and odd English usage that would give away their origins in Africa and Southeast Asia. They set up slick websites with glib text, hawking their investment swindles. Amazingly, they convince Americans, especially older ones, to wire their life savings to someone they've never met. They follow up with recovery scams, portraying themselves as lawyers or even FBI agents able to get the money back. The dupes then wire money to the recovery scammers, promising to recover the money they foolishly wired to the original crooks. Lonely women lured online by potential romantic partners count among the saddest marks. Some stories are shocking. Women send thousands of dollars to help their phantom mates get out of legal trouble, pay for childcare, or travel expenses. And we now have a Trump administration that's actually grooming suckers to fall for the president's investment offers. Shortly after leaving office in June of 2021, Donald Trump was asked about Bitcoin, a type of cryptocurrency, on Fox Business Network. Bitcoin, it just seems like a scam, he responded. Complaining about a scam seemed a good tactic for later getting elected to a second term. Trump cleverly tacked on a patriotic message. I don't like it because it's another currency competing against the dollar, he said. The U.S. dollar should remain the currency of the world, and Bitcoin should be regulated very, very high. As a master scammer himself, recall Trump University and his saddling fans with stock in bankrupt casinos, you wonder how the voice in his head might have shifted at the thought of crypto as a scam. We now know the answer. 5 years later, Trump is back in office. And guess what? He promises to make America the crypto capital of the world. And his family is up to their eyeballs in crypto, while as president, he influences how it's regulated. The latest reports have Trump vacuuming up $1.4 billion in crypto deals. His buyers are not doing so well. About 2/3 of the investors in his meme coins, Trump and Melania, have basically lost their shirts. World Liberty Financial, a cryptocurrency company tied to the Trumps, was launched in 2024. One analysis found that 85% of investors who bought World Liberty's WLFI token after it began trading publicly are underwater. Trump-controlled interests, however, made $520 million last year from the token sales. It would be inaccurate to call his crypto deals scams. His lawyer's fine print protects him from suits. For example, the website for the Trump token specifically calls it an expression of support, not intended to be an investment opportunity, investment contract, or security. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau was created in 2010 to protect ordinary folk from unfair, deceptive, and abusive practices in the financial industry. Trump, in his second term, has been shrinking the agency to mouse size, dramatically cutting the watchdog agency's power. Americans, you're on your own. Our freedom to be scammed has never been greater. Hegseth's War Will Ultimately Cost More Than American Lives by Susan Estrich. So far, the number is $37.5 billion. That's how much we've spent so far on the war against Iran. What have we got to show for it, other than lost American lives? What could we do with that money at home? I'm not even up to those questions yet, because $37.5 billion is just the start of the story. The administration has also requested up to $90 billion in additional funding related to the conflict, much of it for military operations, munitions, and equipment replenishment. That request is separate from the $37.5 billion already spent. And neither of those requests take into account the broader economic costs, including higher fuel prices, supply chain effects, and long-term veterans care. Those expenses could ultimately be much higher than the direct military spending on the war. In terms of what we have to show for it, or will have, the other big news out of the Pentagon last week is that we'll be building a high-T military. Warrior-in-Chief Pete Hegseth announced that the Defense Department will test the testosterone levels of service members 30 and older and offer voluntary testosterone replacement therapy to those with low testosterone levels. We must constantly look for new ways to optimize your performance, your resilience, and your long-term health, Hegseth said of the country's military in a video on X that was entitled The High T Department of War. Is this just another effort to rid the military of the presence of transgender soldiers willing to give their lives for this country? Put aside the health critics for a few minutes and just consider what it says about Hegseth's vision of an ideal warrior force. If high T is the standard and measure, then where are women in this picture? The answer, of course, is what Hegseth has been demonstrating in his pattern of promotions, with their dwindling numbers of women. They aren't part of his vision. He has said as much, and here we have his deed. How about providing comprehensive reproductive care for women of childbearing age before we start them on testosterone testing and therapy? But women are not the only invisible soldiers in Hegseth's army. Consider the limits on beards. As John Duffy tells the story in the Los Angeles Times, Hegseth reportedly became angry after seeing sailors with facial hair aboard a Navy ship. The Navy requires sailors to be clean-shaven unless they've been given a medical waiver. Weeks later, the Navy announced a new policy limiting medical shaving waivers to a maximum of 12 months. Sailors whose qualifying skin condition hasn't cleared by then can be pushed out through administrative separation, a discharge process that doesn't require a court-martial. Now, here's the punchline. Who qualifies for medical waivers? As John Duffy himself, a retired Navy captain, writes, the condition behind most shaving waivers, pseudofolliculitis barbae, occurs when shaved hairs curl back into the skin, causing painful inflammation, lesions, and sometimes permanent scarring. Studies estimate it can affect up to 83% of black men. For many white service members, the clean-shaven standard means a few minutes with a razor each morning. For black men with PFB, it means repeatedly injuring their skin or seeking an accommodation their defense secretary treats publicly as evidence of collapsing standards. And how many black officers do you see in those promotion pictures? In his search for mini-me warriors who look like a younger and idealized version of him, Hegseth is building a military that looks less and less like America. He's doing so at great cost, figuratively and literally. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from the Viewpoints section of the Buffalo News on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. In the Buffalo Next section, Population is Shrinking in Western New York Cities by David Robinson. Western New York cities have one thing in common. They're all shrinking. Each of the region's major cities has lost population since 2020, with the biggest declines in Western New York's more rural areas, according to new data from the U.S. Census Bureau. The data highlights a continuing economic problem for Western New York as it grapples with a slow but steady exodus of people, leaving the region with fewer consumers to spend money and a smaller pool of workers available for businesses that need to hire more people. Buffalo had the smallest drop in population on a percentage basis, with 1.3% decline over the first 5 years of the decade. That left the city with roughly 3,700 fewer people in 2025 than it had in 2020. The biggest drops took place in the two main cities in Chautauqua County, where Jamestown absorbed a 3.6% decline in population, and Dunkirk had a 3.2% fewer residents than it did in 2020. Olean, Niagara Falls, and Lockport all had population declines of 3%. The decline reverses a modest uptick that took place during the previous decade, an increase that had spurred hope that Buffalo-Niagara region had finally stopped losing people after decades of continuous decline. In contrast, the U.S. population has grown by 3.1% during the same 5-year period, the Census Bureau reported. In higher education, Canisius Computes gives students free laptops by Matt Glynn. Canisius University wants its incoming freshmen to all start on the same page, technologically speaking. The university is offering each of its first-year full-time undergraduate students a free MacBook Air. Canisius had found that some of its students were trying to do academic work on devices not built for that purpose, like phones. The university has had a laptop loaner program for some time, but it always became oversubscribed early in the semester. That led Canisius to launch Canisius Computes, an initiative which was a couple of years in the making. The university expects to distribute about 480 of the computers this year to first-year students. The computers are theirs to keep upon graduation or if the students remain enrolled at Canisius for at least 3 consecutive years. The program will cost Canisius about $500,000 this year. We institutionally have set aside funding to invest in strategic initiatives to drive our key strategies, and retention is one of them, improving retention, said Canisius President Steve Stout. So I'm incredibly grateful that our trustees have entrusted us with resources to invest in strategy, and so that's where the funding is really secured. Canisius sophomores, juniors, and seniors can buy a MacBook Air at a discounted price while supplies last. About 30 students have already opted into that offer. Canisius established a partnership with Apple for this initiative. The computers will be configured for academic use, and students will be able to get support from Apple Care Plus and the university's IT services. The university settled on the MacBook Air as a product that would stand the test of time, said Nathan Marshall, Chief Information Officer for IT at Canisius. We're really giving them a tool they'll be able to use post-graduation. Marshall said the investment will pay dividends for students once they enter the working world. When people start at a company, they come in and everybody hands them a computer, he said. That's like a normal part of life, so that everybody has the tools they need to get things done. It just made a lot of sense for us to do the same thing for students and give everybody the same kind of opportunity and tools starting out so that they could all be as successful as each other if they have the aptitude, he said. Hayden Siebenaler and Hannah Ryder were among the freshmen picking up their free laptops as part of the orientation on campus. Siebenaler, who is from Ohio, said the new computer is a welcome upgrade from an old MacBook she could have brought from home to use at school. A newer one is definitely nicer, and I'm very much more prepared, she said. There's more resources I can use on this one. Ryder, who is from Tennessee, said it's a good start to the year with a computer that she knows will be compatible with all of the college's systems. Canisius says the computer initiative is in line with other initiatives the university has launched, all of which are aimed at removing barriers to students completing their studies. It's really important that we're kind of ratcheting up technology and spaces and things for the students, such as the new Golisano Center for Student Success, Marshall said. It's kind of turning Canisius into the next generation place to be. There's a photo of a line of students sitting at computers, and the caption reads, Dominic Mariano sets up his MacBook Air at Canisius University on July 15th. The school is distributing free laptops to freshmen this year, and sophomores, juniors, and seniors can buy them at a discounted price. Morinello joins board at SUNY Niagara. Assemblyman Angelo Morinello, Republican, Niagara Falls, has joined the SUNY Niagara Board of Trustees. His term on the board runs through June 2033. He succeeds William Ross, who had been a trustee for over 20 years. Morinello is a former Niagara Falls City Court judge who was first elected to the Assembly in 2016. He is not seeking re-election this fall. SUNY Niagara stands as one of our region's most important resources, Morinello said. I look forward to continuing to build its value not only as an educational institution, but also as a center for community, a partner to industry, and an economic driver. Deauville Physical Therapy accreditation is extended. The Commission on Accreditation in Physical Therapy Education has reaffirmed accreditation through 2036 for Deauville University's Doctor of Physical Therapy program. Receiving reaffirmed accreditation through 2036 reflects the strength of the program, the dedication of its faculty and clinical partners, and our commitment to preparing the next generation of physical therapists to meet the evolving healthcare needs of our communities, said Megan Whalen, Dean of the School of Health Professions. 90 students are enrolled in the Doctor of Physical Therapy program. The program first earned accreditation in 1991. In retail, New York store closing in Lancaster after 97 years. The New York store will close its doors after nearly a century of being open in the village of Lancaster. Owner Alan Kurtzman announced last week that he is retiring and closing the men's clothing store that was first opened by his family 97 years ago in the village's downtown district. Kurtzman followed his father and grandfather, Henry Kahn, the original store owner, into the business. The store is located at 16 Central Avenue. The historic clothing retailer survived the Great Depression, transitioning from a small West Main Street shop to its iconic current location in 1957. The store sells men's suits, additional dress clothing, casual wear, and ladies' sportswear, as well as men's big and tall sizes. A retirement sale began Tuesday. The decision was not made lightly, and it comes with an overwhelming sense of gratitude for the loyalty and support you have shown us since 1929, Kurtzman said in a Facebook post. Tim Hortons comes to Cheektowaga. Tim Hortons opened a new location at the corner of Harlem Road and Cleveland Drive in Cheektowaga. The operator, Raj Kalra of Kalra Enterprises, who owns 6 other Tim Hortons locations, took on a new build for the first time as part of the project, with the help of Concept Construction. They celebrated with a grand opening in June at 397 Cleveland Drive. The 1,600-square-foot bakery and coffee shop at the site of the former Friendly's restaurant includes a 22-seat dining area and capacity for 16 cars to line up along Harlem Road. Aloha Energy finds a home on Elmwood. Aloha Energy has brought its plant-based protein and energy drinks and powders to Buffalo. It held a grand opening this month for its new location at 770 Elmwood Avenue. The store opened at the former Squeeze Juicery. The brand's products include energy smoothies, teas, lemonades, juices, shakes, and fruit refreshers. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the Sunday, June 26th issue of the Buffalo News. We read from the Viewpoints section of the Buffalo News every Sunday at 6 p.m. Your reader has been Jackie. Thank you for listening.
Coming up next in the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, we have the National Enquirer. At 8 p.m., we have People Magazine. And at 9 o'clock, we have the New York Times Book Review. Stay tuned for these readings and more. And if you have any comments, suggestions, or questions, please stay with us. If you're listening to this publication online, you're probably using our website, a podcast player like Spotify or iTunes, a streaming service like Zero, or a smart speaker. Did you know that we now have a dedicated app that can be downloaded to any mobile device, like a smartphone or tablet, for free? App users can conveniently access our live stream and any episode of our podcast. The following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or have another print disability,